Hello there, my YouTube gang. What's up? It's joniversity again, and this is part 2 of my Great Arab Spring project, in which I will try to assess the Obama strategies. Now, last time we left off with this bottom line.
It's all about the money.
And explain to Chom's Cuckoo why democracy is actually in the interest of the West. And hopefully they'll embrace it. Though I wish it wouldn't have been done in the Obama way. I mean, honestly, if Obama's foreign policy was any worse, then he would simply nuke Washington by himself and get it over with. And if you want to understand how badly the Arab Revolution was handled by the US, well, what better example is there than what happened to Mrs. Clinton in her last visit to Egypt?
The jeers, a reference to the Monica Lewinsky scandal when her husband was the president. Protesters also threw shoes, water bottles, and tomatoes at her motorcade.
Now, I'm sorry that I keep bashing the left so hard, but Jon Stewart, which I love dearly, had this to say about the incident.
You're mad at us when we prop up your dictator for 30 years, and now you're mad at us when we go visit the guy you voted for? I mean, woo! You supply one country's military with tear gas canisters that they use on their own populace, and they never stop crying about it.
Well, unfortunately, Johnny Boy made a little poo-poo with this one, because what the Egyptians actually protested about was this. Yep, that's right. Egyptians believe that the United States actually helped the Muslim Brotherhood get elected, which advertently or inadvertently is true. In fact, Tunisian secularists feel the same. So, how did Obama and his gang actually help the Muslim Brotherhood get elected? Well, as Caroline Glick put it,
and 10 days into anti-regime protests on Tahrir Square, when President Obama called for Mubarak to leave office not in September in an orderly fashion as he offered, but immediately, and so effectively placed U.S. national support behind the Muslim Brotherhood, which was the only other viable political force in Egypt, he abandoned America's most critical ally in the Arab world for the most hostile ideological and political force in Egypt and in the Arab world.
And how do we know she was right? Well, look at the difference in the results before the secularists had time to organize themselves in Egypt. And now look what happened after they had enough time to build their political power. Speaking of Egypt...
What about Egypt? Most important country, but not a major center of oil production. Well, in Egypt and Tunisia and other countries of that category, there is a game plan which is employed so commonly it takes virtual genius not to perceive it.
Wait, you need to be a genius not to perceive it? Well, in this case, you must be an ultra mega super duper genius. Because here's the game plan according to Chom's Cuckoo.
When there's a favored dictator and he's getting into trouble, when it becomes impossible to support him, then send him off somewhere and then try to restore the old regime.
Now, just so you understand how immensely, unbelievably, impossibly wrong Chom's Cuckoo is, not only did Obama and his merry pranksters almost violently ousted Mubarak, they also stupidly called the Egyptian army to loosen its balancing force over the shaky democracy in Egypt. And what do I mean by balancing force? Well, for instance, making sure that the new president won't have the power to go to war unless they agree to it, and dissolve the ultra-Islamist parliament and set a new date for elections for exactly the reasons that I've shown. And then
President Obama has asked Egypt's new Islamist president for a meeting in September. The president will meet with Mohamed Morsi at the UN.
And remember, this is the same president that refused a photo op with Netanyahu. Well, I guess if you want your picture to be taken with Obama, you have to be one of these guys. So, Chom's Cuckoo was wrong about Egypt. And what about Tunisia? I mean, if he's right, then there's no way the United States will support the Islamist regime that was elected there, right?
In the United States, we have an old saying, you've got to put your money where your mouth is. You can't just say you support something, you have to back it up with value. This transfer is only one of many valuable commitments we are making to the people and the new government of Tunisia. A sovereign loan guarantee agreement will provide several hundreds of millions of dollars more in financing for the Tunisian government.
Now, don't get me wrong. I actually think that the best thing the West can do now is pour money into the Arab world in order to hopefully avoid an economic catastrophe, which in the 1930s Germany got Hitler elected. But I would argue that if you're a liberal, democratic president that opposes all the religious shit in his own country, and rightfully so, but at the same time publicly endorse and fund Islamist governments, then your appeasement just turned into a fucking hypocritical danger to liberal forces and peace in the Middle East and actually world fucking wide. Because maybe, just fucking maybe, rather than endorsing the Muslim Brotherhood, you know, these guys
ستكون عاصمتنا ليست القاهرة ولا مكة ولا المدينة وإنما القدس إن شاء الله وسيكون هتافنا على القدس رايحين شهداء بالملايين ستعود الولايات المتحدة العربية على يد هذا الرجل ومن معه إن شاء الله.
You might want to try working with secular, liberal NGOs. And I don't mean the ones the West is currently funding, but those that really make a difference in the Arab world, especially NGOs that provide microfinancing, promote women's empowerment, better education, etc. Because what Obama is doing now is not only driving away all the allied dictatorships of the United States, which in a way is fine by me, but he also drives away the only powers in the Muslim world which are actually pro-West, which are actually pro-United States, and which are actually the ones who could bring real change to the fucking Middle East. And if Obama really thinks that this fucking appeasement will actually change the minds of the Islamists and they will suddenly like the United States, he is more arrogant and patronizing than George W. Bush ever was. And remember, if these secular liberal forces are anywhere to be found, it's in Tunisia.
Ennahda is described as a moderate Islamist party. Ennahda didn't win an absolute majority in the poll. It is expected to form a coalition with two secular parties which came in as runners-up.
And just to put moderate in context, this is what a moderate Islamist party sounds like.
The largest party, the moderate Islamists, Ennahda, are divided.
We in Ennahda are still debating whether or not Sharia should be written into the constitution. Some want it to be its very foundation. But we could also just make it the first article, or even add a paragraph indicating that the constitution's tied to Islamic principles.
Now, I wonder what would be Obama's reaction if the fundies in the United States would have added even a single word to the American Constitution regarding some sort of religious law. And yet, he still supports the Islamists in Tunisia with international endorsement and funding. And again, the worst thing about it is that by doing so, he's driving away the only force which would actually constitute a democratic ally of the United States, which are these guys.
The cries of defiance that led to the fall of former President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali are now directed against the country's Islamists, who want to impose Quranic law, or Sharia, on the fledgling democracy.
Never. I'm a free woman and my children and grandchildren will be free as well.
Women want to protect the rights they had under Ben Ali, to be unveiled in public, to education and to work.
I mean, really, when did you last hear the dear liberal president say even a single word in support of Tunisian liberals? And don't even get me started with his complete betrayal of the Iranians. And for those two things alone, Obama deserves a full-blown, major, unequivocal, international, and dramatic fuck you. Yeah. So, I hope I'll see you in part 3 where I actually lay off Obama and deal with the more serious shit that is going on in the Middle East.
The Crusaders are asking their servants to ask them, to bomb them.
But until then, let's end with some words of wisdom from this analyst.
Ennahda's victory in the October 23rd elections is a significant development. But this electoral outcome does not mean that either the country or the wider region are about to become democratic or Islamist. Winning an election is the easy part. Crafting an Islamic democracy is where it gets hard.
See you in part 3.
I don't think it's funny.